together.
Don't you ever touch me again.
For years, Linda Gray stayed silent. She smiled in interviews, praised her Dallas co-star Larry Hagman, and let the public believe the man behind J.R. Ewing was just as charming off-camera. But now, at 83, she is finally telling the truth. And it is nothing like the story fans thought they knew. Hagman was not just the life of the set. He was also its storm. Linda says his off-screen behavior was erratic, wild, and sometimes heartbreaking to witness. What started as playful mischief soon turned into something darker, and she saw it all unfold. He made people laugh, but he also made people uncomfortable. There were moments, Linda says, she can still not forget, because they went too far. Now, decades later, she is ready to reveal the truth, not to destroy his legacy, but to show the man behind the mask, because what she saw shocked even her. When Dallas first exploded onto television screens, Larry Hagman became a household name almost overnight. His portrayal of the ruthless, scheming oil tycoon J.R. Ewing was iconic, but according to Linda Gray, the man behind the role was just as complicated, maybe even more so. From day one, Larry had a magnetic pull. He lit up the set with his energy, jokes, and big personality. But that same energy came with a cost. Linda remembers how unpredictable he could be. One moment he was charming the crew, and the next he was off on a tangent, loud, impulsive, and clearly under the influence. Hagman was never secretive about his drinking. In fact, he made it part of his brand. He would sometimes show up to set with a drink in hand, or keep a bottle hidden in a prop. There were times when his antics were brushed off as harmless fun, but Linda saw the difference between a prankster and a man losing control. There was a day, she recalled, when he interrupted an intense scene with an improvised monologue that had nothing to do with the script. The cast laughed nervously, but Linda felt something else: dread. She realized then that Larry's unpredictability was not just amusing, it was dangerous to the work and to himself. Still, no one wanted to challenge him. He was the star. He carried the show. Even producers, she says, looked the other way. Linda, trying to stay professional, bit her tongue, but inside, she was already starting to wonder how long this could go on. Behind the laughter and chaos, there was something more, something broken. She began to notice how Larry sometimes disappeared into himself between takes, how his loud persona would suddenly fall quiet. She saw flashes of insecurity behind the bravado, and that is when she began to see a different side of him. But what Linda did not expect was just how deep his spiral would go. As the years went on, Linda Gray watched Larry Hagman slip further into a pattern she now describes as heartbreaking. What had once seemed like quirky behavior or eccentricity soon turned into something darker, a slow-motion collapse that no one on set could truly stop. Hagman's drinking escalated to the point where it was no longer just part of his image. It was shaping his life. He would down champagne between scenes, keep vodka hidden in a coffee mug, and sometimes slur his lines without even realizing it. And yet, he still managed to deliver performances that thrilled audiences. That made it even harder for people to confront the truth. Larry was not just partying. He was in trouble. Linda says she felt helpless. She was close enough to see the cracks forming, but too distant to change anything. There were days I worried about whether he would make it to the end of the episode, she later admitted, and there were nights I worried if he would wake up at all the next morning. There were rumors on set, whispers of confrontations, producers trying to rein him in, co-stars growing frustrated, but no one could force him to change. Not while he was the face of a hit show pulling in millions of viewers. Then came the health scares. In the early 1990s, Hagman was diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver, and eventually, he required a transplant. Linda later revealed that she had seen it coming years before. It was like watching someone slowly walk toward a cliff, she said. And no matter how loud you scream, they just keep going. Still, through it all, she stood by him. She did not speak out publicly. She did not shame him or distance herself. She hoped, quietly, that he would pull himself out of the spiral, that the man she once laughed with between takes might find his way back. But deep down, Linda knew something had changed. Larry's pain was no longer buried beneath the surface. It was written all over him, in his eyes, in his voice, in the way he sometimes looked right through her. And then came the moment when everything broke. One incident that Linda says changed how she saw him forever. There was always a sense of unpredictability around Larry Hagman, but one day on set, things went beyond anything Linda Gray had ever experienced. It was not just another prank. It was not a bad day or a rough morning. It was a moment that jolted her and left a lasting scar. The incident began innocently enough. The cast was preparing for a pivotal scene, one that required emotional depth and intense focus. Everyone was quiet, waiting for the cameras to roll. But then, without warning, Larry burst onto the set in a way that no one expected. He was not in costume. He was barely coherent, and he was clearly under the influence. At first, some of the crew laughed nervously. People were used to Larry being outrageous. But this time, it was different. He began shouting lines that were not in the script, mocking the scene itself. Then he did something that shocked even the most jaded crew members. He dropped his pants and exposed himself, laughing as if it were just another joke. Linda stood there, stunned. The entire set froze. No one said a word. She remembers the chill that ran down her spine, not because it was vulgar or disruptive, but because it confirmed something she had been trying not to admit. Larry Hagman was unraveling in plain sight, and no one could, or would, stop it. The director halted the shoot, but there was no confrontation. No one called him out. The network smoothed things over. The footage was erased. The incident was never made public. Linda walked off set that day and sat alone in her trailer. She later admitted it was the first time she genuinely considered quitting. "It was not about being offended," she said. "It was about realizing I was working with someone who was drowning and being applauded for it." That moment changed how she saw him, not just as a co-star, but as a person. She began to question every scene, every laugh, every memory they shared on screen. Was it real, or was it all just a mask? Even now, she struggles to talk about it. She never wanted to humiliate him or drag his name through the mud, but she also knew that pretending it never happened was not fair, to herself or to anyone else who had to witness it. Still, she said nothing, not to the press, not to the fans, and not to him. But the weight of that silence would only grow heavier with time. After that day on set, Linda Gray felt a shift, not just in how she saw Larry Hagman, but in how she saw the entire machine surrounding him. Hollywood, she realized, was not just enabling his behavior, it was protecting it. And in doing so, it was quietly pressuring everyone around him to do the same. Linda was no newcomer to the industry. She knew how powerful networks could shape narratives and bury scandals, but this was different. This was personal. She had seen a colleague and friend hit rock bottom in front of dozens of people, and no one dared to speak a word of it afterward. Not in meetings, not in press interviews, not even behind closed doors. She now admits that in those years, silence became a form of survival. There were veiled comments from producers, smiles with sharp undertones. "Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be. Larry's going through something, but let's focus on the work." The message was always the same: protect the brand, protect the show, and protect Larry. And Linda? She complied. Not because she was afraid for her career, but because, at the time, she believed she was doing the right thing. She cared about Larry deeply. And despite everything, she did not want to be the one to expose his unraveling to the world. "I thought I was being loyal," she said in a later interview. "But looking back, I think I was just scared of what speaking up might do, to him and to all of us." What made it worse was the loneliness of it. She could not confide in fans, who idolized Larry as the brilliant J.R. Ewing. She could not vent to colleagues, many of whom were just trying to keep their jobs. And she certainly could not go to the media. Her silence became a weight that never left her shoulders. In time, Larry's behavior would settle, at least publicly. He would get help, go through a liver transplant, and continue to work, and the world moved on, forgetting the cracks that had once threatened to split everything open. But Linda never forgot, because she had seen it all up close, and because she had been part of keeping it hidden. Now, decades later, she reflects on that time with regret. "I should have said something. I knew too much," she admits. But back then, loyalty meant silence. And yet, even after all of that, the chaos, the silence, the fear, what she felt toward Larry was not hatred. It was something far more complicated. Despite all the chaos, despite the things she witnessed and the moments she could never unsee, Linda Gray never stopped caring about Larry Hagman. Their relationship was not simple, and it was never easy, but it was real, built on years of shared scenes, long hours on set, and emotional moments when the cameras were off and the masks came down. "He drove me crazy," she once said, laughing with a twinge of pain behind her eyes. "But I adored him." What most fans never knew was that behind the tension and awkward silences, there was also deep affection. Larry could be erratic and unpredictable, but he could also be warm, generous, and surprisingly vulnerable. He confided in Linda more than once, about his insecurities, his fears about losing relevance, even his doubts about whether he deserved the fame he had. She remembered one late night on set, when they sat alone under the studio lights, the rest of the crew long gone. Larry, unfiltered and unguarded, admitted he often felt like a fraud. "People think I have it all figured out," he told her, "but most days, I feel like I'm winging it." That honesty hit her harder than anything else. For a moment, the larger-than-life star melted away, and all that remained was a man trying to survive the weight of his own legend. Of course, not every conversation was that tender. They fought, bitterly at times. Linda never held back when she was angry, and Larry, fueled by ego and alcohol, could lash out in ways that left scars. But what made their bond unique was that, after all the fights, they still came back to each other, not romantically, but as comrades who had survived a battlefield together. There were stretches when they would not speak off set, followed by moments of laughter that felt like old times. Sometimes, all it took was a single line from a scene, delivered just right, to break the ice again. Their connection was unpredictable, but it endured, even when she felt furious, even when she felt betrayed, even when she walked off set, shaking her head in disbelief. Linda Gray never truly let go of Larry Hagman, because she had seen the worst of him, and the best. And that emotional push and pull stayed with her long after the cameras stopped rolling. But it was not until Larry's final days that the full weight of their bond and its unresolved tension came rushing back. By the time Larry Hagman's health truly began to fail, the party had long ended. The wild behavior, the unpredictable mood swings, the outbursts, they had faded. What remained was a man who looked tired, a man who had survived longer than some thought he would, but not without cost. When Larry was diagnosed with throat cancer in 2011, it was a turning point. Linda Gray, who had stayed in touch with him over the years, began visiting more often. Their interactions were quieter now. The banter was still there, but it was slower, softer, laced with something unsaid. She could see it in his eyes. He knew time was running out. In those final months, Linda saw something in Larry she had only glimpsed before: regret. He never laid out a formal apology. He did not go back and recount every wrong, but she could feel it, in his pauses, in the way he held her hand longer than usual, in the moments when he looked at her as if trying to say something he still could not quite articulate. During one hospital visit, she sat beside him as he drifted in and out of sleep. At one point, he opened his eyes, looked at her, and said, "You always knew, didn't you?" She did not ask him to explain. She just nodded. That moment, she later said, was the closest thing to closure she ever received. There were no big confessions, no dramatic speeches, just a quiet recognition of everything they had been through and everything they had avoided saying for far too long. When Larry passed away on November 23, 2012, at the age of 81, Linda was devastated. And yet, She admits she had been preparing for it for years. "I had already lost pieces of him," she said. This was just the final goodbye. What surprised her most was the grief that came after, not just for the man he was, but for the parts of him the world never saw. The kindness, the humor, the self-doubt, the private pain he tried so hard to hide beneath the cowboy hat. She grieved the man who had made her laugh uncontrollably, the man who once ruined a scene by doing a cartwheel in full costume just to break the tension, the man who, for all his flaws, never stopped trying to be larger than life. "I never forgave him," she said once, "but I never stopped loving him either." And now, with time and distance, Linda Gray is finally sharing what she held back for decades, not to destroy Larry's memory, but to complete it. For years, Linda Gray held her silence out of loyalty, fear, and a quiet hope that the truth would somehow reveal itself without her needing to say a word. But now, at 83, she no longer feels the need to protect a polished version of the past. She is not angry. She is not bitter. She is simply ready. In recent interviews and public appearances, Linda has begun opening up, not in dramatic tell-alls or shocking exposés, but in calm, reflective conversations. She speaks with care, with precision, and with unmistakable sadness. Not because she wants to tarnish Larry Hagman's legacy, but because she believes the full story deserves to be heard. "There was so much more to him than people knew," she said. "Yes, he was wild. Yes, he was reckless, but he was also human, and he was hurting." Her decision to speak now is not about revenge or relevance. It is about honesty, about peeling back the glossy surface that so many television icons are wrapped in and showing what lies beneath. A real, flawed person who made people laugh, made people angry, and left a complicated trail behind. Linda admits that part of her motivation is deeply personal. For decades, she carried the weight of memories that no one else saw. The moments of quiet vulnerability, the dangerous highs, the emotional lows. Now, she wants to put those memories into the world, not to unburden herself, but to offer a fuller picture of the man behind the legend. Fans still come up to her and talk about Dallas, about JR and Sue Ellen, about how their chemistry lit up the screen, and she smiles. She remembers the good times, but she also remembers what it cost. She says that telling the truth now, in her own words, is a form of love. The kind of love that does not sugarcoat the past, but honors it by telling it whole. "I protected him for so long," she said, "but I think part of me always wanted people to know. He was not who you think. He was more. He was less. He was everything at once." And so she speaks, not to rewrite history, but to complete it. Because what she says in her final reflection takes everything one step further and leaves fans truly speechless. In the end, Linda Gray's story is not about blame. It is not about scandal. It is about complexity, about what it means to love someone who made things difficult, who caused pain, and who, despite everything, mattered deeply. She does not call Larry Hagman a villain. She does not label him a victim either. What she offers instead is a rare kind of honesty, the kind that comes only with age, time, and the clarity of distance. "He was not a monster," she says softly. "He was a man, a brilliant, infuriating, complicated man." And that truth carries weight. Because for all the on-screen drama Dallas delivered, the real story was unfolding off-camera, in stolen moments, in sharp silences, in the tension between two actors who were also two very real human beings navigating fame, pressure, and personal demons. Linda says she has made peace with the past, not by forgetting it, but by facing it, by telling the truth, finally, and letting the world see what she saw all along. Larry Hagman made millions laugh. He built a career on charisma and swagger. But Linda Gray saw something underneath it all. Something broken, something beautiful, something real. And now, as fans revisit the legacy of Dallas and the man behind J.R. Ewing, they will know more than just the character. They will know the story of a friendship that survived chaos, a bond built on truth, silence, pain, and love. Because in the end, that is what Linda Gray gave Larry Hagman, even when he did not always deserve it.